Hello, and welcome to Timeless Stories for Sleep. Wherever this story finds you tonight, I am glad the world has brought our paths together. Perhaps you have settled beneath a blanket after many busy hours. Perhaps a quiet fan hums somewhere nearby, carrying cool air across the room. Perhaps rain taps softly against a distant window. Or perhaps the world outside has already fallen still. However you've arrived here, I'm grateful for your company. Tonight, we will spend a little while together among some of the oldest stories humanity has ever chosen to remember. Somehow, they have crossed continents and centuries with remarkable persistence, shared by parents to children, discussed by philosophers, translated into countless languages, and managed to make it here tonight. There is something quietly remarkable about that. Aesop's fables originated in ancient Greece, roughly 2,500 years ago. Let's go back there for a moment. Imagine an olive grove just beyond the edge of an ancient village. The afternoon work is finished. The air carries the scent of warm earth and wild herbs. The rustle of leaves and wind gently brush the green fruit. Beneath the silver-green branches, neighbors gather in the shade while one familiar voice begins another story. Through thousands of years, kingdoms have risen and disappeared. Languages have changed. Empires have forgotten their own names. Yet these little stories endured. Whenever that happens, I find myself asking a simple question. What did generations before us hear in these tales that they refused to let disappear? Tonight, we won't rush toward an answer. Instead, we'll simply sit beside the fire and listen. Chapter 1. The Lion and the Mouse. Morning had only just begun to warm the earth. Sunlight filtered through the branches of old trees, laying soft patches of gold upon the forest floor. Birds tested the day with cautious songs, while dew still rested upon blades of grass, too delicate to hold it for long. Nestled upon a mound of fallen grasses in the seat of his kingdom, a lion slept. He was magnificent even in rest. His golden torso rose and fell each breath with measured strength. His great mane stirred whenever a gentle breeze wandered through the woods. Every creature who lived nearby knew this place belonged to him. Even silence seemed careful not to disturb his sleep. Nearby, hidden among roots and stones, a family of mice had begun their morning. Young mice, as like many other creatures in their youth, possessed more curiosity than caution. One day, a particularly brave and adventurous little mouse wandered farther than the rest. Everything seemed enormous. Each fallen leaf became a roof. Each pebble resembled a hill. Each unfamiliar scent invited another tiny step forward. Without realizing it, the little traveler scampered directly across the lion's great forepaw, then across his shoulder. Then, before he knew it, he was standing on the lion's nose. Staring into the lion's eyes, a hurtling paw swept through the air. Before the mouse understood what had happened, he found himself gently, but completely, trapped beneath claws capable of ending his tiny adventure in an instant. The forest became very quiet. The mouse trembled. He knew exactly who held him. His tiny heart raced with all the urgency that belongs to very small creatures standing before very large consequences. At last, he managed to speak.
"My lord,"
he whispered.
"please forgive my foolishness. I never wished to disturb your rest. If you spare me today, perhaps one day I may return the kindness."
For a long moment, the lion simply stared. Then something curious happened. He laughed. Not cruelly, not mockingly, but with genuine amusement. The idea that this tiny mouse might someday rescue the king of beasts seemed wonderfully impossible. What could such a creature ever offer? Yet, perhaps because the morning felt peaceful, perhaps because mercy costs little when one holds all the power, or perhaps simply because generosity sometimes asks no complicated reason, the lion lifted his paw. "You are free." The mouse scarcely believed it. He bowed with all the dignity such a tiny creature could gather before disappearing gratefully into the tall grass. The forest slowly returned to its ordinary rhythm. Birds resumed singing. Leaves whispered overhead. The lion eventually forgot the encounter entirely. Days passed, then weeks. The seasons continued their quiet work upon the woods. One afternoon, unfamiliar sounds echoed between the trees. Human voices, boots upon dry earth, the sharp crack of branches. Hunters had entered the forest. They knew where the lion often wandered. They prepared strong ropes and carefully woven nets. By evening, their work was finished. The lion, returning along familiar paths, never saw the trap until it was far too late. The net sprang upward. Heavy ropes tightened around him. He struggled with astonishing strength, but to no avail. The forest shook. Birds scattered into the sky. Branches snapped. Yet every powerful movement only tightened the cords. At last, the great lion roared, not with anger, but with frustration, and perhaps for the first time in many years, with fear. Far away, among the grasses, a pair of tiny ears lifted. The mouse paused. He knew that voice. Without hesitation, he hurried toward it. Roots became bridges, stones became stairways. The enormous forest seemed smaller now because he knew exactly where he was going. When he reached the clearing, the sight before him would have frightened almost any creature. The mighty lion lay helpless. The hunter's ropes held firm. The mouse climbed quietly onto the net. Then he began to chew. One strand, then another. Patiently, steadily. Tiny teeth working against great ropes. It was not quick work, nor dramatic. No single bite accomplished very much. But little by little, fiber by fiber, the net weakened. Eventually, one cord snapped, then another, then another. At last, the great web of ropes loosened enough for the lion to force himself free. The mighty king of beasts stood once more upon the forest floor. For a moment, neither spoke. The lion looked down at the smallest creature in the clearing. The mouse looked up at the largest. Both smiled. "You were right," the lion said quietly. "You have repaid my kindness." The little mouse bowed. Sometimes that is all gratitude asks of us. The reasons I never fully understood as a child, I always found myself returning to this story. One of the themes I wanted to mention was bravery. One can only be brave when they take on their fear. So fear can also be looked at as an opportunity to be brave. It also is a story about power and how it can shift. There are moments in every life when we may feel like the lion, and moments where we feel like the mouse, based on the situations and experiences life provides us. When in a position of power, is it better to honor that position or abuse it? If the lion had been careless with the power he held over the mouse initially, he would have remained trapped and ultimately powerless. History has a quiet habit of reminding us that no one remains strong in every season. The hand that gives help today may someday receive it. Perhaps that is why kindness has survived far longer than power. Power changes hands. Mercy has a way of continuing its journey. And so, beneath the fading afternoon light, the lion returned to the forest with a slightly different understanding of greatness. Not smaller, only wiser. And so ends our story tonight, and keeping the tradition of storytelling alive for one more night.